context here.
Okay.
Did you, literally get a knock on the door at one point?
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, they hand-delivered a letter over, and my principal deputy, the one that had told me about the travel ban, was still there. And his office had a door that opened into mine, and there's a knock on the door. And when I heard the knock, I knew what it was, because Matt, generally, he'd sort of knock the way we operated. He'd knock and kind of walk in at the same time. When there was a knock and a wait.
Bad news.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So you knew it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not stupid. I recognized that there was a good chance that I might get fired when I did this.
Yeah.
I certainly recognize that was a distinct possibility. You know, I'll confess to you, I kind of hoped not.
Yeah.
You know, I'd been with DOJ for 27 years, and I didn't particularly want to end my service being fired. But on the other hand, I didn't want to end my service defending something that I believed was unconstitutional and antithetical to who we are.
So what'd you do later that night? Did you go home? Did you go out for a
Yeah,
drink?
so I had to pack my stuff. So it was, yeah.
Were you escorted from the building?
Well, I was always escorted from the building because I had a security detail. So I don't think they were there like making sure I didn't steal the staplers or anything, if that's what you mean. But
Gotcha.
But no,
you,
actually,
and you didn't?
No, didn't take anything.
I took one stapler.
Just right. Let's use all this as wonderful context to explore this issue that, you know, I'm 56 years old and I'm not sure I've ever had serious concern about how our president regards the rule of law in America. We now live in an era in which the president not only openly questions and hazes individual appellate courts and judges, but tweets at them. Where, you know, sections of the Justice Department, like the EPA perhaps, seem to be turned on their heads in terms of priority and hirings. Preet, let me throw this out to you first as a subject for a broader discussion. There has been so much hubbub and so much concern, hysteria about the rule of law. What should we legitimately be concerned about, and what not so much?
Look, so I think we should legitimately be concerned about everything, every day, but what level of concern you apply to each of these issues is, I think, open to some question. And so my view is that if you look at what the checks and balances are in the country, you know, the framers were very smart in a lot of ways. They were imperfect, but they were smart in a lot of ways. And some of the things that create these checks and balances that are structural are things that I worry about less. So for example, the courts, we talk about the courts. And it is true that Donald Trump has tried to intimidate, humiliate, mock judges by name, which is, you know, there's a norm against doing that, and there's good reasons not to do that. And I've talked to judges personally, and we all, you know, Sally and I both know a lot of people who are federal judges who do express some amount of consternation about the possibility, if they have some case or controversy that involves an interest of the president or his associates, that they're going to be maligned publicly, and that's not great. Nobody likes to get death threats. Nobody likes to be singled out in that way just for doing your job. But it does remain true that federal judges in our system, you know, have life tenure, and they can continue. And if you don't have life tenure, you know, you get a podcast. But the federal judges I know, even though they're worried about being singled out in that way, they got to that position for a reason, and they're going to do what's right. And you see how the travel ban has fared, you know, after Sally correctly refused to enforce it. So I'm not that worried about the courts. It's bad, it's terrible, it looks horrible. It's bad for people's faith in what the courts are doing, because which I think is not a good thing. He's encouraging millions and millions of Americans to not have faith in what the courts do and to not respect the judgments of what judges order, also exacerbated by the Joe Arpaio pardon. So that's terrible, and you should be concerned about it, but I wouldn't freak out about it. The press, you know, another checking institution, sort of in the Constitution and that First Amendment, I think is as strong as it's ever been. And I think it's a little bit of a Renaissance era for the press. There's scoop after scoop after scoop. And so just quickly, I'm concerned, again, in the parallel way that the president is encouraging millions and millions of people to have a different view of what truth is. And all the, you know, insults and excoriation of particular media outlets that he doesn't agree with, and only because he doesn't agree with them. If there's a week when he agrees with them, then he loves the New York Times. Or a week he doesn't agree with Fox News, he hates Fox News. And that's creating mistrust and I think a dilapidation of our institutions. But I'm not that worried structurally because the First Amendment has not been really harmed in any way. Congress is sort of in the middle as a checking function. I think depending on what the political will is and what the political dynamic is, they will do more oversight rather than less, and I think you're seeing more of that. So the area where I'm concerned is also the area where I have some experience, and that is internally within the executive branch, the trampling of important, soft norms, but important norms of how to allow investigations to happen in an independent way.
Right.
So the firing of the director of the FBI and the circumstances around it and the timing of it, the telling of people to drop investigations, the decision to do all sorts of things without discussion, that nothing requires the president, right, even in the travel ban, to consult with the attorney general, to consult with the national security apparatus, but it seems insane not to do it. And in lots and lots of ways, people are going to begin to discover the things that we have kind of trusted a president and an executive branch to do according to the way it's been done before, not just because it's tradition, but because it makes sense and it keeps us safer and it gives us more hope and faith in the decisions that are being made. Those things I freak out about because we're discovering the extent to which a president, if he or she wants, can push the envelope far beyond most people appreciated.
Let me stop you there. Sally, what do you think we should legitimately concern, or maybe that's not the best way to put it, in terms of the rule of law and the norms associated with it? What do you think the Trump administration has put at risk, and what do you think is not so much at risk?
Well, when we talk about the rule of law, I think one thing that's sort of helpful is to define a little bit of what we mean by that. And it's a pretty simple concept. It's really sort of what separates us from an autocracy. It's the concept that, as John Adams had said, we are a country of laws, not men. I'm sure he would add women now too. And that no one is above the law, that the laws are supposed to apply equally to everyone, and that you don't use it. The executive doesn't use the law to go after political adversaries or to protect friends. And Preet's absolutely right. That's not something that's really codified in a statute anywhere or in a case. That really is protected through norms and traditions. And one of the most important norms and traditions in protecting the rule of law is the norm that the White House and the president has absolutely nothing to do with criminal investigations or prosecutions, period. Nothing to do with the most mundane, low-level case, and certainly that interest is at its zenith when an investigation reaches into the White House itself. And this is something that has been honored by Democratic and Republican administrations alike for generations. And it's such an important concept. And DOJ is so different than the other agencies that DOJ is the only agency that actually has a written contacts policy that specifically lays out what kind of contact there can be between the White House and DOJ.